This training will cover the essential aspects of personal protective equipment, or PPE, for laboratory personnel. We will focus on why PPE is important, the regulatory requirements that govern its use, and how PPE must be worn and maintained in laboratory settings. By understanding the role PPE plays in laboratory safety, employees can reduce their risk of exposure and better protect themselves while working in hazardous laboratory environments. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, exists for one critical reason: protection. In laboratory settings, PPE serves as the last line of defense when engineering controls and safe work practices are not enough. Because hazards can be present at any time, PPE requirements apply to all personnel entering the lab, regardless of role or task. Adherence to OSHA Standard 29 CFR 1910.132 is mandatory for all laboratory personnel. This regulation requires employers to evaluate workplace hazards and determine the need for personal protective equipment. When PPE is required, employees must be trained on its proper selection, use, limitations, and maintenance prior to use. This training ensures that PPE is used correctly and consistently, and that employees understand their responsibilities in preventing exposure and injury. Compliance with this standard is essential to maintaining a safe laboratory environment and meeting regulatory requirements. Minimum PPE essentials are the baseline protective equipment required for anyone entering or occupying a laboratory where chemical or biological hazards are present. They must be worn at all times, even when no active work is occurring, unless a higher level of protection is required. Long pants and closed-toe shoes are required in all laboratories. Clothing must fully cover the legs and feet to protect against physical and health hazards. Shorts, skirts, sandals, and open-toe shoes are not permitted. Lab coats and aprons are not interchangeable and must be worn together when required. Lab coats provide general protection, while aprons offer added resistance to spills and contamination. An apron does not replace a lab coat. Eye protection must be appropriate for the hazard. Safety glasses protect against impact but do not prevent chemical or biological splashes. Splash goggles form a seal around the eyes and are required for splash or aerosol hazards. Face shields provide additional protection but must be worn with glasses or goggles, not instead of them. Gloves are required when hand exposure to chemical, biological, or contaminated materials is possible. Gloves must be appropriate for the hazard, inspected before use, and replaced immediately if torn or compromised. PPE must be donned in the following order. Lab coat fully secured with sleeves to the wrists, eye protection adjusted for proper fit, and a mask or respirator if required and certified. Gloves are donned last and pulled over lab coat cuffs to maintain full coverage. This image illustrates the recommended PPE donning sequence. Please pause the video now to review each step before continuing. Take a moment to review this CDC doffing diagram. You may pause the video to examine each step before moving on. When removing PPE, remove gloves first using the pinch technique to avoid skin contact with contaminants. Remove lab coats by pulling them off by the sleeves without touching the outer surface. Always handle PPE carefully to minimize the risk of contamination. Proper care, maintenance, and disposal of PPE are essential for continued protection. Inspect PPE before each use and remove any damaged or contaminated equipment from service immediately. Reusable PPE must be cleaned and stored according to institutional procedures, while disposable PPE must be discarded in designated waste containers to prevent exposure and cross-contamination. Laboratory PPE must not be taken home for laundering. Always follow institutional cleaning and disposal procedures. Every employee plays a role in lab safety. Wear required PPE when applicable, use it correctly, inspect it before use, and report any damage. Follow established training and procedures, and speak up if you are unsure about PPE requirements. At the conclusion of this training, all participants are required to acknowledge their understanding of PPE requirements. If you have questions or concerns, contact your supervisor or the chemical hygiene officer for guidance.